it depends. I'll also tell you that I think some groups may want you to have a security clearance too. A lot of times you can't get that before you go to work for them. So I would really recommend, this is just my personal suggestion, it's not something that you can't get later. Should you worry about that now before you even enter the career force, I would say no.
So I may have a slightly different opinion. I'm a certified public manager. It took me a year and a half to get it. I got it about 9 years ago. And it was a lot of work and very, very valuable because they teach, it's certified public manager. It's not just managing, well, it's managing people, which is huge, and that's where you get the soft skills. And there's a lot of soft skills, ethics, values, and also process. Trying to look at any kind of process you do, whether it's issuing timesheets to out in the field doing some scientific experiment. You analyze the process to try to look at it from an academic almost standpoint. But I found that invaluable. Now I have not been exposed to other courses, and it's difficult. The county actually paid for me to go to this. It's a lot of work, but several people in the county have gotten that certification, and so I think it's a great thing. I don't think you can take the CPM until you're actually practicing management, but something in that level I think is invaluable. That goes right back to, it's not all technical skills. There's this management aspect, which is people skills, is huge.
Well, I think we agree, Andy. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that they don't need to take it as a graduate student now. Like you said, you can get it
Right.
after you're already working there, and the same thing with the security clearance.
But I think I'd be
those may
impressed. If I had
Would it
a,
help in a resume, though?
I think I'd be impressed. If I was someone who went to the extra to go through some management training, soft skill training as an entry level, boy, I'd be impressed, because I never see it. So
You have
that's,
an education world, I see you nodding.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say project management for education, but anything I think that is going to give you a leg up, that you're more well-rounded and, like you can do a budget, or you would know how to manage a team and assign tasks and delegate. Even if you haven't had that experience, if you've taken a class that shows you could handle it, I could see that as a huge advantage.
So Andy, while the mic's coming this way, was that expected of you, or is that something you just felt you needed?
it was not expected. It was just, I talked to some people who had it, and they told me what it was all about, and I thought, based on what I was doing at the county, it'd be really valuable. So I volunteered.
Just something I've been part of that's a little bit along the lines, but is the Florida Natural Resources Leadership Institute. So that's a program I did several years ago. And I think they're on like class 14. They do a class every year. And so you learn through University of Florida stakeholder engagement and facilitating discussions on complex and difficult issues related to natural resources. And so right now there's probably somewhere around 130 graduates of this program, or maybe a little higher, maybe close to 200. But those folks are around the state of Florida. Right now they're infused, throughout Fish and Wildlife, throughout NOAA, the Army Corps, city and regional governments. And I think gaining those skills to facilitate a conversation and to kind of remain neutral, but bring people together to find common solutions to situations where they're on very far ends at the very beginning of a conversation, especially, in my line of work. Of course, if you want to, I think it could be valuable in any type of work situation, but more valuable depending on, what type of work you want to go into.
Libby, can you just define what a stakeholder is for
Sure.
people?
Yeah, so stakeholders, this is, so as you can see, I've moved a little bit away from, the research science, but stakeholders are anyone who kind of has a stake in any particular issue. So actually this summer we just did a program with a film called Ocean Frontiers. So I would recommend just watching that. It's free to download online, but it goes through 4 difficult situations around ocean management around the country and how they brought people together to kind of come up with a solution. So obviously I'm working, with Dr. Mitchum and others right now on sea level rise locally, and so.
So it could be the general public, it could be your legislators, it could be your government, it could be your other agency folks, it could be your university folks.
Yeah, if you think about, like manatee speed zones, you've got, you've got boaters, you've got fishermen, you've got environmentalists, so, yeah.
Mayors.
All right, we've got time for another question or two, yeah?
So a lot of times you hear that if you have an inkling that you want to go into academia, that it's not wise to make a pit stop in government or anything else along the way, because it tends to produce a publication gap. So my question is, in your fields, do you get to publish? Do you still have active publication records? And, you know, is that preconceived notion that if you want to go into academics that you can't, you know, do something in government first, is that true or false in your experience?
Well, I can start. Actually, one thing, I guess I forget, I am in academia. I'm University of Florida faculty, actually. I'm extension faculty in the county in my position. And we are encouraged to publish, but it's a little bit different. So we have a journal of extension where we share, you know, ways that we do education outreach and innovative methods and so on. So it's different, but, you know, keeping up with writing and so on is definitely encouraged and required. But yeah, I think going, you know, back for a research-based Ph.D., that might be looked at as, you know, a bit of a gap.
Academics aren't the only ones that publish. The government has huge laboratories all over the country that probably contribute a very, very large percentage of the research publications that come out every year. So what you're really talking about is, do you go into government non-research, non-laboratory type stuff, which is where I am working in management. I'm not out collecting data that I work up, analyze, and publish, but I am still working on research papers. I work with the fishermen, they collect the data, they need my help to analyze the data. Pam's husband Bob and I are working on one on fish trap selectivity with and without escape vents. So those opportunities are there. I have to seek them out. My supervisors don't necessarily care if I do it or not, but they're impressed that I do. But the opportunities are there. Going into management, coming out of a research position, going into management, I knew I was never coming back into research. That's not to say I couldn't. That's to say that this is sort of the culmination of a career, and that's the way it is for me. But I think that there are people, some of the younger folks over in my office, who have done a lot of really good research. They're now kind of they're doing data analysis, things like that. I do think they have the capability. They could move back in to research and potentially into academia, because academia is one thing. That's sort of the teaching professorship kind of thing. Research is another thing, and as I said at the beginning of this, you can do research in a lot of different venues. So you could move back into an academic setting doing research. There are research professors here that don't teach much, and maybe if you wanted to move back into true academia and be a teacher, I imagine there are opportunities there. So I wouldn't say it's an exclusive endpoint. Once you move or once you make that decision, there's no going back. I think you're going to have to work a little harder, it's going to be a little tougher, but I think the opportunities remain, especially if you're good.
Yeah, in county government, we you know, the one guy I hired, I'm pushing him to publish because I want him to, you know, he's got a Ph.D. and I'm encouraging him to publish, but frankly, he's finding it very difficult at the time to do that. It's difficult. Now, in terms of, there's a lot of gray literature, non-peer-reviewed publications that we do. And so there's plenty of time to practice your writing skills, and to those who are motivated, we certainly encourage them to try to publish to a peer-reviewed journal, but not too many people really don't do it in local government. But I've got probably a dozen pages of things I've written over the years, you know, dozens and dozens of things, but it's all gray literature, more or less, so.
In terms of a federal agency, we do have a lot of active research and we do publish. There are still a lot of opportunities for all of us to continue publishing. The lack of teaching experience is kind of limiting with our job, but what a lot of our researchers do is adjunct and then teach on the side so that they maintain that experience. And then they have moved back and forth between government and academia. So it can be done, it just depends on the agency.
I don't know any teachers that are publishing, but we do attend conferences quite frequently, and we're encouraged to present and/or, attend and learn from other educators and that sort of thing. But it's encouraged, but not peer-reviewed journals.
Is it difficult to get access to other peer-reviewed resources, like journal access and things like that? Do you have pretty much everything available to you that you need?
We've got all of that available online through the headquarters in DC. So.
Yeah, once you're logged into the server.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I know here, we have an endless number of journals and peer-reviewed things that we can pull, papers and stuff for, but not everybody pays for all of that.
But some private industry do struggle with that, like
Yeah.
consulting companies, you have a hard time getting access. If you're an independent consultant, or I'm sure you probably have limited access at your school to like Science Direct or something like that. There is an opportunity through the Alumni Association where you can, as a member, you can maintain your credentials and log in remotely through USF. I'm not, but I'm rah-rah for the Alumni Association, but I think that if they just promoted that a lot, especially to certain areas that have an ongoing need after they graduate, to have that resource, that they would get people that just pay the $35 every year to be an Alumni Association member just so that they can get the Science Direct credentials to log in. But
Okay, any more burning questions?
We can continue with TGIF.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
There's one back
Someone in the
Okay,
back.
one last question and then
Sorry,
we'll.
I don't know if this will be quick enough or not.
what's the meaning of life?
You're keeping alumni from fear.
Yeah, I feel like but I was just curious. I know when you go the academic route, you tend to have a lot of freedom as far as what research topics you choose. But if you're in an organization like NOAA or USGS, I was wondering, is it more like, you're basically expected to do the work that was your master's work and or what they hire you for? Or is it, can you be like, hey, I might want to try kind of doing, after you've been there for like a couple of years, and you're like, hey, I might want to try and also branch out a little bit. Is there that freedom there, or are they pretty much, people hired you to do this and want you to keep doing that?
There's different approaches to it within our organization. If you're hired in, especially into a large research group, usually you're given a task or given a project, and that's already lined up for you. After you work through that and you kind of work your way through, then you might have a little more control. Some programs will bring in what we call Mendenhall Postdocs. So that's a position that you've applied for, and usually you've presented a research question that you want to start. And if it matches up with something that a group is already working on, then you can come in and be hired as a federal employee, and you're allowed to work on your project. And then as some of our senior scientists, they've developed their programs over the years to where they have a little more control over the direction of the research. Some of our stuff is mandated by Congress, so we always have to incorporate that in. But there's some flexibility to the system.
Yeah. So to some degree, you earn your freedom, but that's just about anywhere. You come in as a assistant professor, they're going to have a lot of controls over what you do as well. But when you're a full professor with tenure, you pretty much do what you want to do. So I'll give you, well, theoretically. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example within the federal system. The Southeast Fisheries Science Center versus the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. They're both in Miami. They're right across the street from each other. One of them is much more applications oriented. That's the Science Center. So at least the groups I work with down there, they do fisheries, collect data to conduct assessments, to calibrate our models to determine what fishing levels should be allowed. Their freedom is less. Over the Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Lab, much more research oriented. They have much more freedom. Those scientists are acquiring federal grants et cetera, bringing in money and to a much greater degree, doing things that are more cutting edge and a little more personally driven and personally owned. So it really depends upon the setting you're in. And the federal government is huge, and the federal research capabilities are massive, not just in marine science, but across the board in aeronautics and defense and just et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's probably, the spectrum is completely covered from total control to total freedom.
Whether you're in academics, federal, USGS, you have the freedom to do anything you can find funding for.
Exactly. If you bring in the money.
Oh, that's true, but it does.
Yes.
Yeah, money talks.
Money talks.
Okay, thank you all for coming, and just let me leave you with a thought. Like I mentioned, not only the alumni here, we're going to be available to answer further questions you might have, meet all of you. Keep in mind that you have a network of colleagues that you can reach out to, and we're more than happy to help you in any way that we can. So, again, thanks for coming. Thank you, panelists. Any final comments? The next Marine Science Networking.
You're putting me on the spot.
Yes.
But I'll let y'all